Every single year, dozens of psychologists and psychiatrists from the US and from Canada come down to Oaxaca City to visit and learn this highly, highly respected elder. She is a Zapotec indigenous healer. Her name is Doña Queta, and she's considered the teacher of teachers. She's not only respected in the indigenous medicine communities, but also in the allopathic medicine communities. She's that respected that she can scold doctors, allopathic doctors, and tell them that they're wrong in certain things that they do. She's worked with government institutions and with allopathic doctors and clinics. And these psychologists and psychiatrists, they come down to learn from her because they feel overwhelmed with the ever-growing cases of depression, of anxiety, and suicide in teenagers and children in the States and Canada. And unfortunately, this is spreading to everywhere in the modern world. Now, what Doña Queta teaches them is the different methods in indigenous communities, in indigenous medicine that can help heal what is called soul loss or power loss. That is PTSD, capital T trauma or small t trauma, as some psychologists call it today. So I'm going to share with you today, how does indigenous medicine sees trauma, emotional wounds, psychological impacts? How is it different from other methods of healing? And how does it not only affect in the obvious ways, but how it affects how an individual weaves her or his thread of destiny or bats, which is one of the crucial pillars in indigenous vision, to be here and be able to weave your bats in the best possible way and weave a life with a greater sense of meaning. Do you know that the World Health Organization classifies indigenous medicine as a medicine model? What is a medicine model? A medicine model is a complex medicine system or medical system, similar to Chinese traditional medicine, to Ayurvedic medicine, and to modern allopathic medicine. Now, there are certain differences, but basically, these are, again, complex medicine systems because they classify diseases in different sections. They have different ways of diagnosing disease or ailments or problems. They have different ways of treating disease. And there's people that have different specialties in this huge, immense realm of indigenous medicine. Now, indigenous medicine focuses on going deep into understanding the root cause of a disease. And it not only sees the physical aspect of a person and the symptoms, but it also goes deep into understanding the spiritual, the psychological, the emotional, the relationality of the individual with family, with community, with environment. Because in indigenous medicine, not having a proper balanced relationship with oneself and with my relationships, that's going to bring imbalance. Actually, the word disease doesn't really exist in many native languages, but there's a word that represents disease, and that's imbalance. And this is beautiful because indigenous medicine observes the universe and how everything complements and how everything is interdependent and how everything lives in communality. As Elder Jaime Luna says, in communality. Now, by this observation, this medicine and many other traditional medicines and indigenous medicines were created to bring, to restore, to keep and maintain the balance in the person, in the community, in a society. Living in the Anthropocene has created huge, huge problems and chaos and imbalance. And we see that everywhere. My name is Alejandro de Santiago. I am a Mayan Arquij, or Mayan daykeeper, or commonly called Mayan priest. I'm also a curandero, or healer in indigenous medicine. I'm officially a traditional or indigenous medicine medic, as officially called in my country, Mexico. I've been walking this path of indigenous medicine with the elders for more than 26 years. And basically, what I'm going to share with you is what I've learned in my practice, but especially from the teachers that I've had. I have also Mayan blood, and a lot of the knowledge that I have comes from Zapotec teachers and Mayan teachers from Chiapas and Guatemala. And one of my areas of focus is soul loss, especially the impacts that fall on what we call the fountain of life. And I'll share what fountain of life is at the very end of this talk. Another one of my areas of focus is also the impacts that block or tie a knot in our butts or our thread of destiny and don't allow us to weave more healthy, more meaningful lives, or lives with a much greater sense of meaning. And what is soul loss? Soul loss is when somebody goes through a traumatic impact, a psychological impact, an emotional wound. That, in indigenous medicine, is seen that it fragments the soul, and the soul, that fragment of the person, gets trapped in that specific time and place in a loop where the trauma happened. Now, the Bacnabal, the rainbow body, or the Tonal, the luminous body in Nahuatl, Bacnabal in Tzotzil Mayan, gets strained because we are considered light beings. Not light in the woo-woo sense or in the New Age way, but we are considered light beings. We have a luminous, energetic body. That's why there's many different ways of referring to this body in indigenous languages. And when this emotional impact happens, then also our Bacnabal, our rainbow body, our essence, our vital essence gets strained. And that may happen because of an accident, a natural catastrophe, being in situations of war, the sudden loss of a loved one, because of rape, sexual abuse, emotional abuse. Also, and we see this ever more often, because of bad plant medicine experiences. Bad plant medicine experiences. Also, to a lesser degree, we have power loss, we could call it, because of toxic relationships, because of toxic work environments, because we're not following or weaving a life that means something to us, not leading a life that feels ours, leads to soul loss and power loss. Also, power loss comes and soul loss comes when we imitate somebody else's life. That's why also we see so much depression and loneliness and anxiety in people today. So what are some of the symptoms of soul loss? Anxiety, depression, a sense that something is missing in the person, that there's a void, disassociation, as psychology calls it, like where the person is there but not really there. The person is absent. There's, I mentioned lack of clarity, lack of motivation, lack of energy, fear, fright. There's like a constant fright depending on the trauma, but this is very, very constant. Now, when this happens, if these traumatic impacts are not treated properly, then they lead to even more depression, to addictions, to falling into even more toxic relationships, anger, and so on. More disassociation. And if not treated, they will eventually manifest physically through pains, through chronic disease, through autoimmune diseases like cancer, diabetes, hypertension. So how do we curanderas and curanderos deal with soul loss? What's that tool that is highly, highly effective, safe, and relatively fast, and that creates very profound transformation in the people that go through this? So just to have a reference, every indigenous community, meaning indigenous community that hasn't been polluted by institutionalized religions, every indigenous communities has in every household, or at least in every extended family, there's at least one person that knows how to treat soul loss, especially minor soul loss. There's the aunt, the uncle, the father, the brother, the sister, the whatever. There's somebody that knows how to treat this. So it's very common. And this is what I'm going to share with you. It's a universal in all indigenous medicines, in all indigenous communities, not only in Mexico and Latin America, but everywhere in the world. There's a similar method that deals with emotional impacts and traumas. When the trauma is very hard, the emotional impact is very big, people come to us, curanderas and curanderos. And the first thing that we do is open up a sacred space. Obviously, we need to know what happened to the person, but we open up a sacred space. And in this sacred space, through a ritual, through a ceremony, we invite the different spiritual communities of the ancestors, of the spiritual guides, of the spirit, of the elements that we're working with, of the Nahuales, and I'll explain what the Nahuales is at the end also of this talk. And Great Spirit, the spirit of the sacred elements. And this in itself creates one of the big important aspects of this beautiful medicine. This generates a space where the person feels, and this is my experience, my inevitable experience, always constant experience. People feel and connect to the sense that they are being sustained, that they are being held, that they are being guided and healed. We say in indigenous medicine that the curandera, the curandero, we're just part of this whole process. We're just one participant, we're one area of support. The great support is given by nature, by life, by Great Spirit. This is not religious. This is a universal constant in all indigenous medicines in the world. So the sense of community, the sense that, oh, I belong to this world. I'm held by the energies of nature and they heal me. So with the aid of physical elements like plants and eggs and fire and water, and it can vary depending on the situation and who's doing the soul retrieval, because there's many ways of doing soul retrieval, but they all have the same structure, more or less the same structure. Now, what happens after we open up the sacred space is the curandero, we cleanse. That's the typical way to say it or traditional way to say it. But basically, there's a release with different elements like eggs and copal and water and fire. We help cleanse and free and liberate from the person all of the emotions associated with the trauma, like anger, grudge, shame, guilt, fear, a sense of impossibility or impotence of something that happened, and even the energetic imprint of the person that perpetrated the trauma, if that's the case. After the freeing of these emotions, the curandero calls on the person's soul and tonal back to their bodies. So the person, if open, inevitably, the person feels that something came back to them. The person says, many people say, oh my God, I never realized I wasn't complete. I never realized I wasn't, something was missing in me. So there's regained clarity, regained motivation, regained energy, and a sense of empowerment. So I'm here, and this being here makes me complete and makes me feel like I want to do great things for me. Makes me feel awesome and great and good and alive. And we see that many people that have emotional impacts or traumas, when they go through a soul retrieval process, there's not only a transformation in how I perceive myself, how I perceive the situation of trauma, but also how I perceive my life. Because all those things that happen were blocking me, were being stuck in my bodies, and were blocking my ability to recognize good opportunities, to recognize myself, to listen to myself, and to continue walking with a greater sense of meaning and authenticity on Mother Earth in this life. And that inevitably helps in creating a life with a deeper sense of meaning and weaving our own individual bands with a great tapestry of existence, because we have more energy, much more clarity, much more consciousness because of that clarity, because we have that vitality, that sense of confidence and empowerment. And what creates this transformation? Self-responsibility for my own healing. I am responsible ultimately for healing, for being healthy. Sebastian Junger, he is a journalist. He wrote Tribe. I don't know if anybody know. Yeah, it's a great book. It's a great book. Yes. Now, he says that there's an epidemic of PTSD in our modern world. And he talks about indigenous cultures and how they heal trauma, or PTSD in this case, in community. So we, in the modern world, have lost that sense that we are gregarious beings and that we don't only need the community or the sense of community of human beings, but also the sense of community of life and nature and earth. So that creates this radical difference. And soul retrieval helps us not only to heal the physical and the emotional and the psychological, but it also helps us to heal the relational. It helps me see with a different eyes the trauma that happened, the people involved, how I relate to other people because of those traumas, how I relate to myself, how I relate to my work, to my life, to breathing, to my physical body. There's a huge transformation on so many levels. And with this newfound energy and clarity and sense of completeness and sense of being supported and the vitality and the sense of healthy empowerment, people inevitably create changes in their lives that they did not think either they could do or they were related. Because many of these traumas create blocks in our lives that we have no idea in how many areas they affect, like the fountain of life, a subject that I'm going to tell you at the very end of this talk. But before, I'm going to share with you some very specific situations that I've experienced with the people that come to me to the clinic and the huge transformations that they've gone through, and how this beautiful ancestral technique that the elders had kept and shared for thousands of years can help us to bring more healthy environments, to bring balance into our society, and how it can be a complement to allopathic medicine, to Ayurvedic medicine, to Chinese traditional medicine, to psychiatry. You've been to Keter, yeah.
Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.